Of 10-Minute Tuesdays at 2 with Beth. I think what I did a few minutes ago was film the entire thing and then fail to upload it. So I'm glad to be with you here for 10-Minute Tuesdays at 2 with Beth, even though I'm running a little bit late today. I apologize. This is our fourth installment of 10-Minute Tuesdays at 2. Last week, we had a nomination in the comments that we look at two of the most popular of the Psalms, Psalm 23 and Psalm 100. So let's do Psalm 100 first because it's the shorter of the two Psalms. It's only 5 verses long. Some of you have asked which translation I'm using for this, and I typically use the New Revised Standard Version. In Psalm 100, the musical superscription tells us that this is a Mizmor LaTodah, which means a song of thanks. And the first 2 verses are very familiar. Make a joyful noise to the Lord, all the earth. Worship the Lord with gladness. Come into his presence with singing. The first verb in this, make a joyful noise to the Lord, can also be translated as shout to the Lord, as in the kind of shouting you do in a worship service because you're moved or filled with the Spirit. In other contexts, this type of shout is a battle cry or a cry of triumph. The implication is that it is a shout that the whole congregation or the whole nation does together. The second verb in these verses, worship the Lord with gladness, can also be translated serve the Lord with gladness. Either meaning is allowed because worship performed by the congregation is a form of service that we offer to God. In fact, we even still call it a worship service. Verse 3 goes on to give us this instruction. Know that the Lord is God. It is he that made us, and we are his. We are his people, the sheep of his pasture. If you remember this verse differently, it may be because you remember the King James Version saying, it is he that has made us and not we ourselves. The translation in the New Revised Standard Version is based on a reading from several Greek manuscripts, Jewish notes from the Middle Ages that we call the Masorah, and the Dead Sea Scrolls copy, respectively. The Hebrew itself in the traditional text reads, Hu asanu velo anachnu. Literally, it means he made us and not us. That's what's printed in most traditional Hebrew texts. The other texts that I mentioned above change one letter in the spelling, which doesn't alter the way the words sound, how they would have been recited in synagogue, but does change the meaning to he made us and to him we belong. So the NRSV decided that this reading went better with the rest of the verse. So the whole verse would read, he made us and to him we belong. We are his people and the sheep of his pasture. That familiar image of us as the sheep of God's pasture we'll see again in Psalm 23. The final 2 verses suggest the congregation entering the temple to worship. It says, enter his gates with thanksgiving and his courts with praise. Give thanks to him and bless his name, for the Lord is good. His steadfast love endures forever, his faithfulness to all generations. Our second psalm for today is Psalm 23, which is probably the most familiar psalm of all time. In it, God is compared to the shepherd that cares for his flock, providing them with everything they need and assuring their safety. It starts out again labeled as a song of David, and it is written, the Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He makes me lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside still waters. He restores my soul. These are the basic things that a sheep needs. Green pastures to feed on, still water to drink from, the things that restore one's life. God also provides security and direction. The next verse says, he leads me in right paths for his name's sake. Even though I walk through the darkest valley, I fear no evil, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. The rod and the staff are the sticks that the shepherd uses to steer the sheep into one direction by tapping them this way or that way. And the path is leading, in this case, through the darkest valley, says the New Revised Standard Version. The phrase we're used to hearing is through the valley of the shadow of death. What the NRSV has done is translate what that word means. The one word here, Zalmavet, is a combination of two words, literally shadow and death. And this word occurs only 18 times in the Bible, 10 of which are in Job. It describes the deepest of dark places, places that are as frightening and final as death. Yet God can shepherd us even through this deep darkness. The psalmist goes on to say, "You prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies. You anoint my head with oil, my cup overflows." This shows the psalmist being seated by God at a table across from his enemies and having God honor him by anointing his head and supplying him with so much wine his cup overflows. "Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I shall dwell in the house of the Lord my whole life long." The goodness and mercy of God mentioned here echo the steadfast love of God mentioned at the end of Psalm 100. Both mercy and love here translate the term chesed, which describes the covenant faithfulness of God, the love in action of God, which is more than just how you feel about someone, but also contains how you treat them. At the end of the psalm, the NRSV says, "I will dwell in the house of the Lord my whole life long," instead of forever, because the terms describe a great length of days, meaning more than just the abstract idea of eternity, but rather the cumulative amount of days in the psalmist's own life. These are certainly two of the most favorite psalms in the Psalter, and it's been fun to talk with you about them today. If you have another psalm or two that you would like us to discuss next week, we will meet again here next week for 10 minutes on the Psalms. And I hope that the week treats you well and that you find time to find some peace and contentment during your time of sheltering. God be with you.